Well, welcome Air Force and Space Force contracting. Welcome. I don't have a long time to speak to you. They told me only 3 hours. I got to keep it really tight. So bear with me. I know a lot of you, are worried about that. I am too. I do have a lot of serious things to pass on to you. Some of you have heard me brief some of these things before, and I apologize if some of it sounds redundant to some of you, but it bears repeating a lot of the things that need to be discussed. And we need to, as senior leaders, I believe, speak more candidly and clearly with Americans in general, and certainly those that we serve with. And so part of my role is to come here with a candid message and really a plea to all of you. The urgency could not be higher in my mind. And I will tell you, I've grown up amongst you. I have sat in every seat you're sitting in. I know you. I know that you are inherently innovative folks. I know that you're inherently mission focused. I know that you are business leaders. Me just saying it doesn't change anything. All it does is unleash you. And I want to unleash 8,000 creative contracting officers in hacking our Cold War system, both acquisition and resourcing system, to find, like water over the rocks, how do we turn dollars into fly, fight, win? How do we turn dollars into offensive and defensive space capabilities? How do we turn inside of China? And right now, according to testimony on the Hill in 2017 by the Undersecretary of R&E, China can do in about 3 years what it takes us about 16 to do. That's the pace that we have to improve upon. We cannot just improve upon our own past results. We have to improve according to the pacing threat. And that's what we have not been paying attention to quite as directly. So I'll go through this pretty rapidly. A lot of you folks know what we're doing. In fact, many of you are even on a key results team. We've got 83 key results teams operating simultaneously across 4 lines of effort this calendar year. We're using a methodology called OKRs that Google used, a number of others used. We've set up a board of directors across Air Force contracting business, use the analogy. But in plain English, this is what we're doing. We're moving from linear thinking to systemic thinking. We're moving from bureaucratic approaches and behaviors to entrepreneurial approaches and behaviors. We're switching from defense, trying to keep ourselves out of the Washington Post or, God forbid, embarrassment of the Pentagon, and move to offense and say, what's the threat doing and how can we push and push and push to get more rapid against that threat? We're moving from what used to be called business advisors to what I call business leaders. And the reason for that is a little bit arrogant, and I admit that it is. But I believe it to be true because I've been in many assignments both in contracting and outside of contracting to include program management requirements and other things. But when you look at us as business leaders, we sometimes undervalue our own knowledge, and we think that everybody kind of knows what contracting does and how to navigate the FAR and how to turn dollars into fly, fight, win. And that's not the case. There is no one else that knows the details of how to turn dollars into fly, fight, win than Air Force and Space Force contracting. I would just tell you that. And so in many cases, you don't just have a customer who has a mission, you have a mission. And your mission partner has a mission, and you both have value in getting to that mission later. So in one page, this is the flight plan. 4 lines of effort. Anytime you're doing a massive change effort like this, you got to change everything. And we're changing everything from what people are paid to the workforce development to training to the regs, and we're deleting a lot of the mandatory procedures, getting rid of all that, moving authority to the tactical edge, relying on people's judgment and abiding mistakes. And as long as we stay within our core values, which I value very highly, I would tell you, go. And if you have a boss that says, I don't know what you do, but just keep me out of jail, you tell them that's lazy leadership, because that's what I tell them. That's lazy leadership. This is serious business we've got to go on. And we've got to get through a lot of stuff to get that mission done. Line of effort 3 is owning the high ground and optimizing the acquisition enterprise. You're going to hear from some Space Force folks this week because they're now joining us as a sister service, but still the contracting family is staying together, and we're going to leverage each other's success. Lots going on in line of effort 3. This is where some of the more cosmic thinking is going on. And then line of effort 4 is our wartime role, everything from planning in joint operations, harnessing economic power within the military instrument of national power, and then doing that on the battlefield. And the Air Force is playing a leading role in that in the Joint Force. We have to do something different or we're going to lose. I'm telling you, with the House Appropriations Committee, Senate Appropriations Committee, there's been a lot of broken trust between DOD and those committees. And frankly, they're not interested in supporting a lot of reform from what I've heard. But frankly, I couldn't say it more starkly. If we can't get that help and try to find new ways forward to keep congressional oversight intact and strong, as our Constitution implies, but start to move money faster, start to have more flexibility through portfolio funding rather than program funding. When you put the program name on an appropriation, you might as well put the company name on it. And our monopsonistic advantage is gone right at the very beginning. And if you prevent us from moving money rapidly to opportunities and threats that pop up during execution year, when the estimates for that were created 4 years in some cases before that execution year, when China can move money in 20 minutes inside of our own capital markets, we have to change that. But what you can do within the structure that we've got is to hack that system, and you guys are the ones that can do it. I'm not interested in breaking the law, I'm not interested in breaking regulations. I am interested in challenging them where they don't make any good sense. And that's where I need you guys to adopt the culture that we had as airmen in 1938, rather than the culture that we have today. Okay, line of effort 1. We've upgraded over 1,200 civilian billets across Air Force contracting. We were paying our people dead last in the federal government. Dead last. It was embarrassing to me, and I told the Vice Chief so. Line of effort 2, tools, not rules. You can see a little picture there that kind of says it all. That was Operation Clean Sweep, where we got rid of every mandatory procedure below the Air Force level, just got rid of it. We moved it off into PGI, and then we're going to move it into what's called tactics, techniques, and procedures, and then burn everything else. Just burn it down. I'm Cortez, and I'm burning the ships, baby. We ain't going back. We ain't going back. All right, line of effort 3, lots of cosmic stuff going on here, but I can tell you, we've gotten hugely more efficient in the last 3 years, 34% fewer actions for the same amount of mission bought. Now, we're just barely scratching the surface there, folks. We have a long way to go, but we are by far the most efficient contracting force that there is. Line of effort 4, lots of work being done there. We are the best at contingency contracting in the department, bar none, and we're scrapping everything we have and starting over. Imagine that. We've got all new training, all 3 levels of contingency contracting training, because we've got to tool up our warriors that get on the battlefield for the next fight, not for the last one. All right, these are the things that we have coming up in calendar year 21. So these are just highlights. I mentioned there's like 83 teams, but we're getting after all of these different things. I'll let you just kind of glance at that. You can get involved in these key result teams. Doesn't matter where you are, rank doesn't matter, don't care where you work. If you have passion, you have ideas, get on the team. We want you on the team.
I warn you, I'm going to disagree probably with a lot of what you're going to hear during this. And keep in mind, I have no accountability, so you might as well listen to them. I'm just going to talk to you about what I think might be important to you and some of the things that I've learned over the fact. And by the way, there will be no PowerPoint during this conversation. 0. Why? Because PowerPoint is evil. And in fact, if out of this conference you wanted to do one thing to increase the efficiency of Air Force acquisition by about 30–40%, it would be ban PowerPoint. And you might actually learn how to talk to each other again. Just imagine what a world with a Xi or a Putin as setting the leading vision for global policy would be like. This is a very important time in the evolution of the world, and the United States plays a unique role. And that role is being rapidly diminished, and we had better fix that. And you're part of that solution. When I was asked to come here to give this speech in the middle of the summertime, I said, gee, nowhere I'd rather be, you know. Paris, Rome, you know, no, this is where I wanted to be because I really love you guys and deeply appreciate what you do. And so I'm going to continuously, thank you. So I'm going to continuously criticize all of you for the rest of this talk out of love. So just remember that. And, you know, from my perspective, as we look at this, you are often obsessed with getting the right answer because you perceive that as being a key part of your job. But I would respectfully submit if you spent the same time getting the questions right, you might get better results. Because getting the correct answer to the wrong question, which we do, by the way, in the department, the Air Force, the Department in general, and in industry, every single day. We get so focused on the answers that we're not sufficiently thoughtful about the questions. And if there's one thing that I'd like you to think about, it's that. It's just, you know, if we want to hit the deck running, I would argue that sometimes hitting the deck thinking might be better, just as a change of pace. And the FAR, you should excuse the expression, is an embarrassment. The FAR isn't a set of instructions for how to acquire things. It's a book of don'ts. Every time someone screwed the government, they wrote a paragraph that said, you can't do this. And after a while, you have something the size of an encyclopedia, which is a collection of don'ts. And yet we try to act like this is how you should acquire things. No, it's how you shouldn't acquire things. If you want to know how not to acquire things, study and learn the FAR. If you want to learn how to acquire things, you have to take a completely different approach. And I've worked with contracting people who on one level know how to use the FAR. You could interpret that as work around it in such a way that they get the mission accomplished. And I've met other people whose answer is, you can't possibly do any of this stuff here. It's this paragraph. In fact, I think they should have an answering machine message which says, hi, this is Fred. I'm sorry I'm not here right now, but if you wonder, the answer is no. Would save a lot of time. Just have that as the answering message and everything's there. So you guys, especially you young or in mid-career, need to decide which of those two people you want to be. Do you want to be the people who say no? Because very easy to do. You know, I guarantee you there's no question in the history of civilization that you can't find a no for somewhere in the FAR if you choose to interpret it that way. At the same time, if you think your job is to support mission, to address some of those issues with the trajectory of our country, which is not healthy in many regards, well, then you don't start with that. You are cognizant of that, but what you have to start with is this thing called vision. What is your vision for how we should do this all better? If you don't have that, and by the way, you don't all share it, you need to get it. Because it's not about mission statement and it's not about platitudes and slogans that look nice. It's about what do you care about deeply that enables you to do this critical mission that you have in front of you. And, you know, from my perspective, you have built the self-licking ice cream cone. Because, for instance, some percentage of you in this room, probably half, when you leave the service, will end up working for one of the tier ones or the equivalent. And so it's not surprising that people agree on things because you're all the same. The whole system has been built to be identical and monolithic. Makes it very hard to introduce new ideas when everybody is familiar with a set of processes that go back a very long time. It's not impossible to change it, but it's difficult to, and it requires focus on that. One of the challenges that you find is the bigger organizations get and the older they get, the more bureaucratic they get, the harder it is to innovate and the slower they are. Generally speaking, young little companies are very innovative, move very fast, but at a certain point someone tells them you need to grow up and start adopting appropriate business practices and all that, and they do, and they get bigger and they get more successful, and they slow down and they become less innovative because they're focused on bottom line and production and getting things out and next quarter results and all of that, rather than doing really cool stuff. Some companies avoid it, most don't. And so you just have to expect that. And you have to realize that in the United States, most of the innovation comes from the small startups and innovative new companies who you universally torture in your contracting procedure. You basically expect the little companies to grow up and act like big companies, so you're pushing them to destroying what's good about them and how they work, rather than saying, gee, maybe we should have a special set of rules for innovative little companies. I then want to talk about what does it take to be innovative? What is actually the definition of it? How do you do it? And by the way, you can't just ask people to be innovative, right? You don't get in any organization the behavior you ask for, you get the behavior you reward. And if you basically say, I want you to be innovative, and then say, but don't screw up, I don't want to drive up costs, risk has to remain constant or lower, et cetera, you're going to get a very special kind of innovation only found in organizations that exhibit that behavior, and it's called no innovation. And we have to keep things simple. And the ability to do that, there's a great apocryphal story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway, that really started with the space program, where when we decided we were going to have manned space flight, and understand how fast this country used to move, and NASA, which was the greatest engineering organization in the world, we did Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and we're halfway through Skylab in 8.5 years from a cold start with no industrial base directly relevant to doing that. Right now, NASA can't get an RFP out and award it in 8.5 years, let alone put stuff onto orbit. And this applies to the Air Force, and it applies to NRO, and it applies to everybody else. We've become paralyzed by these big, gigantic, complex systems. And rather than taking the commercial approach of an MVP, a minimum valuable product, what is the simplest thing you can get out there? And by the way, make it modular and scalable. We take the other approach. These things have to do all things to all people from the first day. It doesn't work, and it never has worked. Acquisition is an art, not a science. Learn to appreciate the difference and embrace the artists and the big idea thinkers that you're going to need, both within your organization and with the contractors, and create an environment that makes it comfortable for them to coexist rather than seem like oddities and outcasts. You need to integrate these people who do very different types of thinking into your organization, because again, your job is not to make sure people follow the contract. Your job is to execute against mission. And following the contract is part of that, but that is completely insufficient to doing what the country needs you to do. Consensus is the enemy of invention. If you're building consensus in your organization, you're killing invention. At a certain point, invention, innovation are just the opposite behaviors. First one is vision. I've seen your papers which say your top priority is talent. You're not going to get the talent unless you have a vision. You need a clearly articulatable vision that says why you're doing this, how, and what your principles are to do it. If you don't have that vision, and all of you are singing off the same sheet, and by the way, believe it. And by the way, if you don't believe it, go somewhere else. Pretty simple. Everybody's not going to agree with the new ways of doing things. You don't like it. Nobody's making you stay. Go somewhere else and do something else. And that's just fine and may be the right answer. Get the vision right, why I should believe it, and what it's going to do for me in my career path and for my family to help make this a reality.
The PK, I knew they had it wired, but this is like ultra wired. So thanks a lot for letting me be here. So thanks, General Holt. I got in my room last night and I had this. So I reviewed it in pretty good detail, and I'm thinking about it more. But it might be it is one of the better plans. I'm not sure it's the best plan, but it's a really good flight plan. And I won't go through. Usually I spend a good time doing the landscape of China, because if you haven't read defense news, if you're not reading open literature of what the Chinese are saying, then you really need to. Because as General Cooley, who I work with a lot, right, he calls it existential. And other people call it existential too. And we're not saying the sky's falling, right? We're just saying, hey, just go read this. I mean, just go read it. You make your own evaluations, but just read this open literature of what's going on. So it's very important. We absolutely have to get capability to the field faster. And it's not just getting it there faster, because we can spend tons of money in cases getting capability to the field fast, but it's actually keeping it modernized efficiently. It's getting there efficiently, right? Meaning cost, schedule, performance, and it is keeping it modernized. And that's what this digital transformation, this digital revolution is about. It's about changing our business. We are changing our business.
Dr. Roper, if you remember, he published something called Bending the Spoon. And I would encourage you guys to look it up. This is a very, very big deal. What Chris is talking about here is going to absolutely revolutionize the speed of combat capability to tarmac like that. And Dr. Roper got beat up pretty severely in the DC area from that recrimination culture of saying, oh yeah, you can't do it, you can't do it. He talked about Century Series fighter idea, where in the 70s we had an explosion of different fighters all the time, some with overlapping capabilities, and we were just putting new ones out all the time. Now you look at what we can do, and it's like the business model, I would tell you, is forcing the timelines to be 50 years out. We had a great discussion. And what I want you to understand is, although we're having this discussion with Joe and Alex, which I think are the perfect people to have this discussion, because not only do they know how to get this thing done, but they're very extreme patriots, and they really understand the threat well. And so that's really, really awesome. But at Joe's house that night were, like, I don't know, 30 to 40 investors that are all waiting for a clear demand signal from us on what needs to get done here. If Americans know what the scoreboard looks like, and even if it's the 9th inning and we're 5 runs down and 2 outs, we will win.
All of us are playing for the same team. We're patriots. We believe that the American military is one of the greatest forces for global peace and prosperity in human history. Today, the tables have turned. Commercial companies and scrappy computer science graduates working from Silicon Valley garages are years ahead of the DoD in crucial areas such as artificial intelligence, computer vision, 5G, quantum computing, and directed energy. We need to empower acquisition officers like you to rapidly identify, assess, and contract promising commercial technology.
And we saw 9/11 happen, and we saw the failures that kind of led to it on the intelligence side. And then we saw them spending billions of dollars with the legacy primes on a lot of solutions. And we realized, and, you know, talking to the guys, seeing what was happening, we realized that was passing for solutions at that time was stuff that was way behind Silicon Valley. This wasn't something where we were ourselves necessarily special. It's just that Silicon Valley itself had attracted so much talent, had to push things so far ahead, that we realized there was this giant gap between what was possible with America's top technologists and what was being deployed to help our war fighters and to help solve these problems, protect the homeland. And that gap was unacceptable to us.
How did you look at the barriers to entry, and what kind of headwinds did you face, and how did you muster the courage to both move into a space where we have so much regulation and unique barriers to entry into this marketplace, and you have some very powerful primes that are not interested in you joining?
What it was there's a realization that frankly it was a necessary duty that somebody from Silicon Valley helped, because we realized what we had and what we were exposed to was so much further ahead that it was right. So it was this complete conviction that we knew for sure that we were right, and what we were doing was better, and what we were doing was going to save American lives. was going to save billions of dollars for the government. And so because we had that complete conviction, and because we had the sense of duty that this was necessary for America, it was a very scary time what was going to happen if we didn't have the right systems in place to get the bad guys.
And one of the things they told me was stop over prescribing stuff in your RFPs. And so, for example, in one case, they said, well, when you tell us in an RFP what the contract type is going to be, and you want it to be cost plus, that immediately requires that we have a compliant cost accounting system, which we don't want to do. But if you, on the other hand, say, we want a great software product, and you don't specify even a period of performance, because in that case, I think we specified 18 months cost plus contract. But if you had taken off the restrictions, then Palantir would have proposed and said, no, a similar amount of money, but we'll do it in 3 months and we'll do it fixed price. And so that was really eye-opening for me. Any comments on that?
I happen to think that in general, for software, cost plus contracting almost never makes sense because there's just lots of different ways of achieving things with software, and what you care about is the outcome. So I think there might be a gap there. But I do think with Google and a lot of others, there's this strain of anti-American philosophy that's very scary to me, and it's very dangerous for our country. And part of the reason I think Palmer and Trey started the Underrule, which we backed them on, and part of the reason we started Epirus and started looking at this again is really based on our concern that our top tech companies are not supporting the DoD, and we realize it's our duty now because Alex and I are making a lot more money in a lot of other areas. We've been building companies in the last decade after leaving Palantir. But we realize, wow, if we all these other companies, all this our money we make, it's not going to really matter if we're not able to take the top talents and secure peace around the world by securing America's supremacy. China is at economic war with us very aggressively. They, one of our companies is a leading e-commerce company. It sells, several $1 billion a year to U.S. consumers. The goods come from everywhere, including China. And China was unhappy with it. They didn't own a company doing this. And so they're subsidizing its competitor with 20 cents on every dollar. I just found out secretly they're doing this, obviously, which makes it very, very hard to compete. It's very unfair. So they're going after all strategic areas, and they're subsidizing secretly and making it really tough on us. And so right now we have a lot of money going towards legacy systems, legacy ways of doing things that are more expensive. They are not going to beat China in any kind of near adversary conflict or competition. And the best chance we have, and I do think America is going to win and going to be able to do this, but the best chance we have to do that is to make sure we figure out how do we help the good new companies, how do we help the places where this is the best solution, how are you going to get at resources? And I think that mindset, we're just like making sure the best solutions get the resources they need to win. I hope a lot more people share that because I think that's how we're gonna succeed here.
So Vice Chief, let me start by introducing our mission-focused business leaders to you. You have in the room here over 600 of our mission-focused business leaders from around the globe. In every mission the Air Force does, everywhere the Air Force does it. That's who these folks are, from boardroom to battlefield. And live streaming is another 600 to 800 of them out of an 8,000 contracting force worldwide that is disruptive and innovative and doesn't stop at the first no and clearly understands the challenge and the threat ahead of us.
You really are a pivotal part of Accelerate, Change, or Lose. I want to start with, like I always do, when we think about the world that we're in right now, the environment that demands the change and the acceleration that the chief is seeking. And we talk about, we hear great power competition. What does that really mean? I like what General Mark Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when he was talking to the giving the commencement at the Air Force Academy, he had this quote. He said, we're now in the 76th year of great power peace, following World War II. And the structure is under stress. We can see it fraying at the edge. And with history as our guide, we'll be wise to lift our gaze from the never-ending urgency of the present and set the conditions for a future that prevents great power war. Chinese are doing a little bit differently. The Chinese don't necessarily see this as an existential battle where there's only one winner. They're happy to coexist with others around the world, but they want to coexist as the power that writes the rules rather than lives by the rules that other nations together who value individual liberty and freedom right. sustaining our current weapon systems, what we call now our legacy systems. And legacy, I'm starting to feel like legacy is like wisdom. You know, the older it is, the more it's legacy. But man, at some point, and nothing against you, B-52, KC-135, et cetera, but holy cow, there's very few of us who were born before those systems anymore. But that's what we've been doing. We've been leveraging and maintaining those capabilities, and that's been good enough. That's been good enough for taking care of the likes of violent extremists and basically looking at, potential conflagration with Korea or Iran or some of those other ones. But that's not good enough. What's got us here now is not what's going to get us there into the future. We need to understand and recognize what is at stake. We can lose. As I talked earlier, we can lose the competition with China. We can lose slowly and insidiously those freedoms that we hold dear. We can lose deterrence. We can lose the ability to attract our great airmen and to keep our great airmen. That's all at stake. And I love that about this. It stares us straight in the face and says, what are you going to do about it? And the second part is accelerating. Some people like to focus on the word change. Everything's changing. Just change isn't sexy anymore. We're all doing it. But if we do it at this pace, we are going to lose. And so the word accelerate is key. And Chief's all about it. He wants to go fast. It's not a thing we'd like to do. It's a thing he believes, and I do as well, that we need to do. So how are we going to do this? More capabilities? Yep. Next generation platforms? Yep. Innovative concepts and approaches and innovative ways of doing things? Absolutely. Absolutely critical. And that's why, in General Holt's flight plan for Air Force contracting, he's got exactly right. This goal, and you said it a couple times in the intro, mission-focused business leaders, not just business advisors, mission-focused. We've all got to be mission-focused. We've all got to drive towards that same mission. Sometimes built to last becomes an albatross because we're trying to maintain and have that system last when it's not relevant anymore. So we have to change the paradigm of built to adapt, built for agility. And what does that mean? We talk about the trinity of digital engineering, of open systems architecture, and of agile software development as the sort of backbone of how we're going to develop and acquire capabilities in the future. That's the key. Remember way back in the 50s, the Century series, we went from F100 to F105 in that many years. We were moving and we were learning as we were moving from one system to the other. And that's how we learned faster. Those acquisitions and those capability developments are only as good as the contracts that bind all parties. And that's again where you come in, ensuring that we have that baked in to the compact that we make with industry, that those open architectures and those capabilities can continue to keep up with the pace of change and get us back out in front and with a good margin in front of our competitors. That's key. And your role is part and parcel to that. But you know who's doing really well at this? Commercial industry is doing well at pieces of this puzzle. But it's not the traditional commercial industry. So we need to understand how to deal with, how to make contracts with, how to leverage what commercial industry has to offer in a way that we can bring it to scale and move it to what we need for our military applications. Never been more important than now. But it's a new way. We have to understand, again, those contracts, the compacts that we make with industry, those are going to make or break us. You're right in the center of that as well. I want to let you know how proud we are of what you have done to show that you're ready to step up and not just be a part of the team, but actually be leading the team. Got tons of examples of that. I'll tell you one that comes to mind, what we've all been living through, COVID. Well, when COVID struck, you guys jumped into action. Contracted over $2.3 billion and awarded 2,600 contractual actions in direct response to the pandemic at the speed of relevance, ahead of what anybody thought could be done. You pushed $3.9 billion in accelerated awards to companies like Raytheon for the Small Diameter Bomb 2, Northrop Grumman's design and development of its first polar orbiting space vehicles, pushing that money out there to make sure we can develop those capabilities faster. This establishment of an Air Force Business Leadership School with UVA and University of North Carolina, this idea of infusing, mission-focused business leaders, that shows you're leading and understanding where the Air Force needs to go and where the expertise and the competencies that contracting brings play a part of that. So that's where you've been. You're a proven quantity for accelerating change and being sort of the part of the heartbeat of what makes us move forward as fast as we need to. And having said that, as I say with all of us, we're not done yet, and we got to go faster. We have to continue to go faster. If you make a mistake, and General Holt's got to back us up here, I know he will, making a mistake doesn't mean you're going to go to jail. Breaking the law means you're going to go to jail. But understanding what the limits are and trying new things, we got your back. We have to have your back because you have to fail, but fail forward. So finding out where these opportunities are and pressing them, we're going to have your back. We need you to continue to innovate. Those things that give insights that used to be the sole responsibility of humans, that now that decision support, not the decision, but the decision support can come at you faster with the development of some of these algorithms. This, we talk about big data and algorithm development. You can't have good artificial intelligence unless you have a bunch of data, and you have to have that data be able to be aggregated in a certain way. The commercial industry is doing this like crazy. We need to leverage that because guess what? The Chinese are doing it as well. That's where we need to. I think that's one of those, the key areas that I would say is probably the most important. That's a dual use that we frankly have not fully leveraged yet. And it's everything from how to manage, platform as a system, as a service, software as a service, cloud computing, hybrid clouds, computing at the processing at the edge, fusion at the edge, all those sort of things that we're using as terms. Industry's been doing it. And I think we need that to be my number one, to leverage that.